Martin Popoff here from the Contrarians, back again with another episode of Who Invented Heavy Metal. Now, this is a bit of a special episode. I'm doing this after I've already done some albums once. I wanted to make this an album-centric exercise because I've always talked about how the intentionality, the intention of the invention of this thing called heavy metal. It's nice to see it spread across a bunch of songs on an album, but I've when we posted these episodes and we've got lots of comments back, or when I put them on Facebook or whatever, I get a lot of people bringing up, oh, what about this from the past, the 60s, the 50s or whatever. And so there's a lot of that that goes on, and I have to remind people that I have been very album centric with this thing, and that's why we started with Jimi Hendrix and Cream and Blue Cheer, and we moved our way through MC5 and the Stooges and Led Zeppelin. As I'm speaking right now, we still haven't done any of the 70s ones yet. So what I wanted to do was a special episode, and we're just going to pop this up. The idea is this is if you want to title this one, it's not the title of any album by anybody, but we're calling it 1250 BC to 1895 AD. And what I'm going to do is just so I don't overwhelm myself, I'm going to do some other ones like this where we break up some more of the early years, very proto heavy metal years. I'm just going to kind of go through and check the entries that I had in my Who Invented Heavy Metal book. Right. So this is a book of 120,000 words. It's a big, thick book, very small print that ends in 1971. Right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and, like I say, just talk about the entries in here that I had as the milestones in the invention of heavy metal from the year 1250 BC to 1895 AD, and we're going to call it right there as an episode. So here we go. So 1250 BC, our story begins in the fabled Battle of Jericho. Joshua and his army makes the walls of Jericho fall with loud, terrifying trumpet blasts produced by an army marching around the walls, blowing trumpets. So the idea here is music as an act of scaring, of terror, of warfare, of all that sort of thing, right? So the idea of big, scary, heavy music, and music so loud that you could, just like Venom made the plaster crumble, or Status Quo made the plaster crumble in some, these old UK theaters kind of thing. Actually, the Venom one was the pyro going off in America, I think is how that went. Was it America? I don't know. Anyways, this is a famous heavy metal trope too, of literally bringing the walls down with your music, right? 250 BC to 250 AD. I think that is Turks. Turks and Greeks and Romans put on their first wild rock and roll shows. Christopher Knowles wrote this book called The Secret History of Rock and Roll. I've been listening to tons of Christopher Knowles lately because he's doing this cool thing. He's got this philosophy around synchro mysticism, right? Anyways, but this book is all about how you had headbangers and people going crazy, and music and rock and roll concerts and wild, partying and drinking and all that stuff back in the old days. And this is, quote unquote, the birth of rock and roll, right? And that's why he calls the book that. 50 to 96 CE, a big chunk of the Bible is written, providing trouble with a number of violent tales to go with the revivalist doom metal of the early 80s. So, so the Bible is a great source material for if you even wanted to be like a fire and brimstone, Christian rock band, quote unquote, like Trouble, or if you wanted to be a satanic band. So the Bible is maybe the birth of heavy metal, right? Because there's just so much that gets talked about from the Bible in heavy metal themes. 10th century, Viking music and singing with respect to Viking singing. An Arabic merchant visited here by Denmark in the 10th century, said, "Never before have I heard uglier songs than those of the Vikings in Slesvig in Denmark. The growling sound coming from their throats reminds me of dogs howling, only more untamed." And it goes on and on. Like I say, the entries in this book are big, long entries with supporting quotes and the whole thing. So like I say, we're only going up to 1895 here. So there's lots to cover, but I'm not going to go through it all because I want to make this a more or less succinct episode. So there again, you get ugly music, right? You get the birth of Venom at this point, or the birth of Motorhead, 1977. Lemmy's voice is a Viking voice, whatever. 12th century Notre Dame organum, which was designed to fill Gothic cathedrals with swirling sound, just like the immersive Leslie-driven technique of John Lord. 15th century pipe instruments come from various cultures, but were invented as a Scottish instrument around 100 AD. They were popularized in the 15th century. The Great Pipes of the Highlands were a feared instrument to the English as they led the Scots into multiple wars. The drone propelled bloodthirsty troops forward with rolling with patriotism. The English eventually banned them as illegal upon fear of death. So here you get war music, right? Slayer, War Ensemble, of course, much heavy metal is to do with war. Scary music, you even get band music, it's illegal music kind of thing. So that's kind of cool. And then I've got a big long quote from Jonathan Pieslak, author of Sound Targets, in here. 1547 to 1589, the development of the theorbo or bass lute for spectacles in the Medici court. The theorbo creates a form of power chords. Okay. 1553 to 1612, the acoustics of San Marco and Venice were exploited, particularly in the multi-choral works of Giovanni Gabrieli and Monteverdi, pioneers in the dynamics, volumes, power, and the manipulation of acoustic space. 1702, first documented usage of the term diabolus in musica, or the devil in music, to be applied to the tritone. Legend has it that centuries earlier, the tritone was banned by the church for its foreboding sound. The tritone is a musical interval, a restless one, a series of notes, but the main point within the story of heavy metal is its inherent dissonance, a doomy or evil quality. A clear, simple example is the main riff in Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath, and later that band's Symptom of the Universe. A modern term applied to this sound is the devil's interval. So this goes on and on. There's a big long quote here from musicologist Susan Cusick. Again, that's all pretty much explained there. We know that doomy quality, the tritone, the devil's note, is a huge, massive thing in doom, but it's also a big thing in thrash. Like I've often argued that thrash is essentially sped up Black Sabbath more than anything. I think a big influence on thrash. There's almost as much Black Sabbath in thrash as there is Speedy Judas Priest in thrash. Okay, we move on. 1703, Johann Sebastian Bach, 1685 to 1750, enters the workforce as the first virtuoso composer. Bach is the main classical influence cited by Ritchie Blackmore and Yngwie Malmsteen. Then I've got a big long quote from Uriah Heep keyboardist Ken Hensley on classical and rock. So we get the whole argument about how I always talk about how heavy metal is invented when the blues is taken out of rock and roll and it's replaced by classical. And I think you get that with Deep Purple and rock. Ritchie Blackmore as a person, I think you even get it with Uriah Heep and Black Sabbath to some extent, right? 1720s, Turkish Janissary bands, which gave us our percussion instruments. We still use Turkish cymbals in our drum sets. These bands were used to frighten opposing armies into submission. Beethoven brings them into the last movement of his Ninth Symphony to recall that militant sound. 1776, George Washington apparently thought so much of martial music that he demanded that his own fife and drum corps practice regularly and get better with the threat of demotion and loss of pay if they failed. 1776, Beethoven kicks it up a notch by embarking on a European tour similar to Mozart's. Beethoven is known for a majestic, blustery, heavy, dramatic sound. 1800, date for Niccolo Paganini's early concerts, lived 1782 to 1840, rumored to have sold his soul to the devil for talent. Although very little evidence of anything along these lines exists. A cited influence of Yngwie Malmsteen, Paganini was an alcoholic by 16 and sober by 20. Paganini is cited as an early practitioner of the tapping technique, but tapping in various contexts has existed for centuries. And I get a big long quote from musicologist Susan Cusick. So yeah, there you go. We're starting to actually hear some music, Bach and Beethoven and Paganini, that you hear as a big part of heavy metal moving forward. Certainly power metal is very classical based, progressive metal, obviously Yngwie Malmsteen. 1812, American General Andrew Jackson's troops advanced to drum rolls written by Beethoven. 1820, the best known Maori haka is the kamate, composed by a chief named Teo Raparaha. Boy, I'm probably blowing all those in you know whatchamacallit. In the 1820s, it's a type of dance and vocal combination used shouting and stamping of feet. It's not necessarily a war dance, but sounds quite aggressive and scary. It is used in the modern day by the All Blacks rugby team from New Zealand to psych them up for matches. 1824, Beethoven's The Symphony No. 9 in D minor, Opus 125, a recurring influence on heavy metal musicians of a classical bent. It was covered, quote unquote, by Ritchie Blackmore as Difficult to Cure in 1981. 1836, when General Santa Anna wanted to frighten the defenders of the Alamo into either fleeing or surrendering, he played El Deguello, a song that appeared to the enemy to surrender or die by the sword. It signified that no quarter would be given. According to various English, Spanish, and I wrote that way, obviously for purposes. According to various English, Spanish dictionaries, El Deguello means no mercy or no quarter. The literal translation is slit throat. ZZ Top have an album called Deguello. And then I've got this big, big long quote from Sergeant Major and psychological operations expert Herbert A. Friedman in there. Then we've got 1837, the year of Berlioz, Recchia, multiple brass bands located around the hall to give surround sound, and The Ride to Hell from Damnation of Faust. And I've got a big long quote from Sandy Pearlman from Blue Oyster Cult, who really dug into this whole idea of figuring out the classical roots of hard rock and heavy metal. He's got whole treatises on this, right? And a chunk of that is in here from my interviews with him. 1843, the beginning of Giuseppe Verdi's productive years, or as he calls them, his gallery years, known for his foreboding sound. September 5th, 1857, the premiere of Liszt's Faust Symphony. March 6th, 1869, Russian inventor and chemist Dmitry Mendeleev conducts a formal presentation on his extended version of the periodic table, which arranges the elements by atomic weight, leading to a discussion of heavy and heavier metals, not to be confused with Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, who is a famed and documented Deep Purple fan. Yeah. So we get the periodic table and heavy metals. And remember, Medvedev is a big Deep Purple fan, which is really cool. And that's one of the reasons Deep Purple made all those inroads into the Soviet Union. 1876, we're into Russia, I'm not sure. 1876, Richard Wagner, 1813-1883, composes Götterdämmerung, Twilight of the Gods, a work for which metal has had kinship. And I've got a quote from Bill Ward in there and Gavin Baddeley. July 1884, Anton Bruckner begins work on his imposing Symphony No. 8 in C minor. Now, here I've got a long quote from Sandy Pearlman, who really goes into, I'm going to read a little bit of this because he often talks a lot about Bruckner. I think any long piece on heavy metal should actually pay serious attention to its roots in 19th century European romantic music. And that's just a fact. That's an unidentifiable and supportable axis or origin point for heavy metal. And the transmission line is horror and science fiction written by the disciples of Anton Bruckner, who left Third Reich Austria and came to the UK and America and were recording for films. I do a class where we bring in Gary Lucas, and he plays this Fantasia for his crypto orchestra, the heavy metal guitar. For him, one guitar player, one guitar, and 600 pedals, more pedals than you've ever seen in your life. And it's based along the last movement of Bruckner's 8th Symphony and its QED moment. And about 30 seconds into it, it's like, oh my God, has anybody ever doubted this premise? It's all over within seconds, and it really does prove the point. You don't even need the whole band to do this. It's just the guitar. That's the point. It's the guitar, which is inflated by the function of all these pedals, which create impossible harmonies and impossible stacks of octaves, you know, and all that stuff that is actually all there in the romantic orchestra. And it's actually all there for a heavy metal guitar player as well. But once you've got your army of pedals, your infinitude of pedals, you can do stuff in real time that is generally done only in overdubs and blah, blah, blah. So there you go. And then we close off with 1895 Mahler's Resurrection Symphony. The fifth movement, very dramatic, features prominent organ, which was by far the loudest, most power-evoking instrument available before electric guitar. Also see Virgil Fox playing Bach's D minor toccata and fugue. So there you go. I'm going to stop it there. I don't want to be overwhelmed. I'm probably overwhelmed you already, but just to prove to you in the comments that, you know, we've got all these little bits and pieces, and we're only up to 1895 here. So, you know, when you bring up Link Ray, or you bring up you know, Eddie Cochran or whatever, all that stuff's going to be discussed. But let's stop it there. So that is going to be however we slice and dice this. We're thinking about even you know, linking them together in a long form piece. But for now, this is just a standalone episode, and it is our very, very earliest episode of Who Invented Heavy Metal. Please like this, hit like if you like this, subscribe, comment if you like, throw in, you know, comment and bring in some more stuff pre-1895 for me. That would be really cool to see. And you can join our Patreon, and that gets you onto our panels if you like, and you can be part of those things, which is also a lot of fun. We've got merch as well. But there you go. Who Invented Heavy Metal, the very earliest episode.